Flippity Flop, una revista digital en un mundo patas arriba. Suscríbete y pásate por flippityflop.es para tener acceso a mucha más variedad de contenidos, porque siempre hay otra opción.
Hola, bienvenido Kinglsey Dennis, encantada de que estés aquí. Hoy vamos a tener una entrevista que es un reto para ambos porque tenemos la barrera del idioma, que no es una barrera puesto que Kinglsey Dennis entiende perfectamente, es inglés, está ahora mismo en el Reino Unido, entiende perfectamente el castellano porque ha vivido 12 años en Andalucía. Yo entiendo perfectamente el inglés, pero ambos estamos más cómodos en nuestra lengua materna, sobre todo para hablar de temas como los que vamos a hablar hoy. Siempre el pensamiento y la palabra van unidos y la lengua materna es insustituible. Con lo cual, vamos a hacer lo siguiente. Yo voy a hacerle las preguntas en castellano, él me va a contestar en inglés, cada uno va a estar cómodo en su idioma, pero nos vamos a entender. Y luego lo vamos a subtitular, posiblemente ahora cuando lo estéis viendo ya esto esté subtitulado y así lo podemos compartir con los oyentes de cualquier lengua. Bienvenido, Kinglsey Dennis, es sociólogo. Bueno, él estudió literatura y lengua en la Universidad de Inglaterra, luego se especializó, hizo un doctorado en sociología, ha acabado siendo profesor en la Universidad de Lancaster del Reino Unido de sociología, ha escrito novelas, ha escrito también, luego se pasó a la no ficción, se ha publicado a sí mismo varios libros, también le han publicado editoriales, bueno, tiene una trayectoria alucinante. Este libro que escribió, bueno, con esto que pasó, ya sabemos, estos últimos años, se titula Asalto a la realidad, biopoder y la normalización del engaño. Lo tengo subrayado, o sea, casi no hay una página en la que no haya nada subrayado. Es altamente recomendable. Aquí está publicado por la editorial Blume, que me lo mandó y a los que se lo agradezco, y también a José Marina, que nos ha puesto en contacto, ¿vale? Que nos seguía y fue el que nos puso en contacto y le agradezco muchísimo la oportunidad de haber leído este libro y de conocer a Kinglsey Dennis. Luego hay un nuevo libro que aún no está traducido al castellano que se llama The Inversion, la inversión, cómo hemos sido engañados para percibir una falsa realidad. De esto hablaremos un poco, daremos alguna pincelada porque yo no me lo he terminado, solo he leído algún ensayo. Y bueno, es que tenemos aquí tema para horas. Bueno, Kinglsey, tú has vivido en Andalucía, has vivido en Turquía, has vivido en República Checa, ahora has vuelto al Reino Unido y sigues, tienes una visión de la realidad, supongo que más amplia que tus compatriotas, ¿no? Hoy vamos a hablar, vamos a titularlo Joining the Dots, como tú dijiste el otro día cuando hicimos un ensayo, que es uniendo los puntos, ¿no? Porque tú hablas mucho de la máquina de poder moderna que está como tratando de desfragmentar la mente humana y cada vez es más difícil unir los puntos, cada vez nadie tiene el panorama completo. ¿Cómo lo hace? ¿Cómo lo consiguen?
Well, thank you, Lara, and thanks for the invitation to be here. Great speaking with you, and thanks for the introduction. Well, I've always been interested in trying to see the bigger picture, to join the dots, as we say. It's like, you know, if you go into a museum and you go really close to a picture and you just see a small part of it, you have to stand back to see the whole. And, you know, and we live in a time of increasing information, a more globalized world. And you would think that we would be interested in trying to get the bigger picture. But you see, there's always been a kind of narratives of fragmentation. You know, we have our nationalism, we have our education, we have our conditioning. And social conditioning is something I've looked at for many years, because I've always thought it's, you know, you can't get to the bigger picture unless you can first start to decondition your filters. And so I've been working through deconditioning my filters for many years, and traveling, as you said, traveling helped me to see different cultures, to experience different thinking patterns. And you're right, my background is in sociology, and my personal interest is in what you could say perception and consciousness, how human thinking patterns affect the way we live, affect how we see our reality. So I suppose my large background is social themes connected with perception, thinking patterns, and human consciousness. Put them both together, then you have to see the bigger picture. You have to step back, and so it's in the past we had a kind of before we had more of a kind of consensus reality. Not completely true, but the narrative that we were told more or less gave us a stability. But what's been happening over the past recent years, especially the last decade, is this story that we've been told has been breaking down even further. I've referred to it as the consensus reality meltdown.
Sí, la realidad consensuada, ¿no? De la que hablas en el libro, que está muy lejos de la realidad real.
Well, this fragmentation, it helps the power regimes, because if we have a fragmentation, people don't know what to think. There's uncertainty, and when people are in a state of uncertainty, they're cognitively and psychologically more willing to accept a new narrative given to them. And that's how I start off this idea of the Great Reset was the great narrative that has been given to us as the new normal. But first we had to go through a period of fragmentation and splintering. And that's what's been happening.
Esto es muy interesante porque de aquí, de todo este razonamiento de la realidad consensuada, bueno, podríamos estar horas hablando sobre el debate filosófico de qué es la realidad, ¿no? ¿Cuál es la realidad real? Aquí hay mucho, pero llegas a un término que me encanta, que es la posverdad. De ahí llegamos. ¿Nos puedes explicar qué es la posverdad?
Yes, I mean, in a way that connects with these certain narratives about modernity and postmodernity. Is that, the bigger picture is that reality went through these big phases whereby there was a kind of religious reality in the medieval times, and then we went through the Renaissance and the scientific epoch, and so we kind of went into a secular narrative where science told us the stories of the world, the universe. So we went from a kind of religious, spiritual cosmology philosophy into a scientific one. And then what happened in modernity is that the philosophy started saying, well, there's only one truth, and that is there's no truths. All truths are relative, which is kind of like a kind of a false statement to say that the one truth is that all truths are relative. So that was post-modernity, and you had all this philosophy saying, well, we're in a modern world, we can choose our truths. And so that started to individualize people more, but not in a positive way. I don't feel individualize people to say, well, I can do what I want because that's my truth, and so you start having greater competition, and this global competition built up into the global free market, and people can say, well, if I succeed and you don't, that's because I've done better than you. There's personal competition with your neighbor. And so that became very, very selfish individualism. And then when we started with online information, then there were so many different opinions, so many individualized selfish opinions that people couldn't choose what was the great truths. And then, of course, now, I think several years ago, post-truth became a dictionary word, And the politicians used it. Trump used it during his campaign in America by saying, "Oh, don't believe the media. It's false truth. We're in a post-truth age." So the politicians started to use this language for their own benefit, and so now the cat is out of the bag, as we say. Anyone can say that now. Anyone can say, "Well, we're in a post-truth world, so nothing really matters." So what do we believe in? We're in a moment of great uncertainty, great instability, psychological fragmentation, and there's trauma in the world, and that's a very delicate stage because, as I said, we're more vulnerable because there's more cognitive dissonance. We're more vulnerable to want a great authority to tell us what is the truth. many people are vulnerable to wanting authority because they want stability. And that's what's been happening in the last few years. This authoritative narrative is coming in.
Claro, y con todo esto que dices es muy interesante porque hemos llegado creo que al culmen del relativismo moral, ¿no? Todo es relativo, todo esto que cuentas, y eso ha producido un nihilismo moderno, del que hablas también al final del libro. ¿Cuál es la solución? Primero, ¿a qué crees? Te iba a preguntar a qué crees que se debe, creo que lo has explicado un poco bien, pero ¿cuál crees que es el antídoto, la solución para salir de este nihilismo? Porque es como que hacen falta ya verdades y statements, ¿no? Como decís en inglés, o sea, algo que sea así, ya está, y parece que no lo hay. ¿Crees que tiene vuelta atrás este nihilismo?
Well, my kind of understanding is that, as I said, we've gone through this great scientific materialism, and it's taken us into a period of deep materialism, what I called hyper-materialism. And so that is deeply secular. So what it's done is it's exteriorized the human being. So we've been conditioned to feel that the only truths are external to us. So we go outside of it, which means that, one, we lose trust in ourselves because we feel that we don't have the capacity to find our own truths, which means that we lose touch with our own intuition and our own instinct. And we kind of lose our independence by wanting to put our dependency outside. So for me, that's a kind of cutting off of the human spirit. It's a deep, deep secularism, and it's pushing us into deep materialism. And at the end of that book, I talk about transhumanism. That's an extreme of this pathway. So you can see we've gone into secularism and then into a consensus reality meltdown and post-truths, then into hyper-materialism, and everything's external to us. So therefore, the human condition has no solution. That's what we're being told, which also gives the consequences of external authority and dependency on technology and transhumanism to give us the solutions. That's where the nihilism comes from. My sense is nihilism is a deep disconnect with the human spirit. And I point to, in the book, I point to the works of, for example, the philosopher Erich Fromm. And he said, we've had this split between to have, tener, and to be.
Ser o tener, el libro de Erich Fromm, famoso siglo.
Yeah. So I talk about that, and I think that, I agree with that. We've gone externalized to have, and we're losing to be. So the solution to nihilism is to come back to the inner world, the inner spirit, the inner intuition, the inner being of us, because that's where we're going to find our solution and our future.
Es muy bueno. Mira, voy a leer algo que es una cita de este libro, ¿no? De Asalto a la Realidad, que dices, la forma en que se desarrollen los próximos años determinará no solo la dirección de nuestro futuro humano, sino también, y eso es lo más importante, cuán humano será nuestro futuro. Aquí abrimos el tema, ¿no? Que es el tema de ahora, que es el transhumanismo. Cómo estamos en esa brecha en la que o tiramos por un lado o ya vamos embocados. De esto hablas más en el segundo libro y creo que ha surgido y que vamos a meternos por ahí porque has citado el hipermaterialismo y tú hablas mucho de Rudolf Steiner y me gustaría que lo contaras aquí, cómo está arraigado y cómo al final el alma humana es lo que se pierde y estamos justo ahí, ¿no? En el vértice.
Yeah, I do feel that we're in this critical time where we're coming to a threshold or a crossroads where it's possible that the human future will go down a different evolutionary path. And I've talked about this in general, so, we can bring this thing together. One is the path where we choose the external technology as a solution, and that takes us down transhumanism. And the argument that I talk about is that I call it the weak body hypothesis, is that the authorities or the narratives are telling us that the body is weak. For example, during the last few years with the medical situation, the body has been attacked. And so this is saying, well, the body has health issues, the body cannot evolve any further. The only way to evolve as a human being, because the body has come to its limit, is by joining with technology, transhumanism, to strengthen the body, to make us choosing our characteristics. Of course, the other path is that, for me, that's a complete false path, because the future of the human doesn't have to be a bodily evolution. We need a psychic evolution, an evolution of the human being, the human mind. And so Rudolf Steiner, the Austrian clairvoyant and philosopher and mystic, I mean, he saw this coming over 100 years ago. In 1920, he was writing saying that if society goes down an increased technological future, there's going to be a danger. Because one of the dangers is that technology will create a divide, a split, a separation between the human spirit. Because the human spirit, of course, is always in contact with, vital energies, with contact with something greater than us. Of course, the spirit is not material. But if technology comes in and human beings start to put all their focus, all their faith, all their future onto technology, then we will lose our remembrance and our focus on the human spirit, and B, technology will try to intervene to actually cut off our antennae, so to speak, our reception of vital energies, our intuition, our inspiration, our sacred connection. And so I think that's the critical threshold that we could be coming towards. And if you think about that idea, and then look at the world around you, you can see things in a different light. You can recognize how the world is being pushed. And even on the global stage and the political stage, these powers, these groups, they understand the human spirit. They know how powerful it is. That's why there's a lot of attempts to disconnect the human being from their spirit.
Sí, ¿y crees que con todo esto, crees que podemos llegar a un mundo donde los humanos estén excluidos? ¿Que la parte humana esté excluida?
Well, personally, no. I think humanity is much more resilient, and and also human beings are waking up now through these years, because we're being pushed and pushed. But of course, I think that's also, there are certain powers that believe this is possible. So I think that's the weakness, because there's a certain mindset, a certain agenda which believes the human being can be totally controlled. And that's why in the beginning of Asalto a Realidad, I talk about biopower, the power regime, because I think it's important to frame the power regime, to have an understanding of how these other groups are thinking and their strategies. And if you can frame that, you can see, part of the structure of what is imposing on us.
Sí, o sea, aquí se ha creado un shock global del que hablas también, ¿no? Que ya lo sabemos en 2020, para implantar una ciberseguridad, hacernos sentir, como decías, que nuestro cuerpo es débil, que no es suficiente, que hay que apoyarlo con tecnologías, con fármacos, con lo que ya sabemos, de lo que no podemos hablar. Y ha salido este término nuevo de biopoder. Me gustaría que explicaras más profundamente lo que es el biopoder, ya que está incluso en el subtitular, biopoder y la normalización del engaño, porque creo que esta es una de las claves del momento que estamos viviendo, ¿no?
Yeah, I think biopower is a crucial subject to understand, because it's like an umbrella term. Within biopower, we have other categories. We have biopolitics, biocapitalism, and biosecurity. So first, if we look at biopower, now I took the word from a French philosopher, Michel Foucault, because in the 1970s, especially, he was writing about biopower, power. Now, what he said was the state power is utilized through institutions such as schools, universities, hospitals, asylums, different types of power. So schools And universities have power, conditioning power over our mind, what we think. Now, the hospitals and the asylums have power over our body, our health. So if you go into a hospital, what the hospital says usually is the last word, you know, they have authority over your health. But this power was enclosed in an institution. Now, what's happened now, post this time, post Foucault, is that the power has gone out of institutions, and it's a fluid power system. Now, the question is, before, the state had power over your body in the hospital, in the asylum. But when you was in life, you know, you were generally free, or we thought we were free. So how can they have health power? Biopower means power over your biological body. So, of course, what happened in 2020 in the pandemic and this big shock is that it instigated a new regime of biopower where the state could have power over the human body wherever it was, even if it was in your home, you know. And we knew that there was instances in certain countries like Australia where the police went into your home if they thought you was contagious. So they have power over your body, doesn't matter where you are. And it also means that they have power over the administration of life and death. Okay, so power over the body is now everywhere. Okay, and then, of course, now power over your body is still an external thing. How to get power over the internal part of your body. And that's where technology comes in. Because technology, of course, if they can get of course, you know, with the testing, for example, the testing was to find out what's going on in your body. Now, technology can always analyze your body. Why do you think so many people are wearing these health trackers? You know, your health tracking is tracking your data, your heart rate, your blood flow, your sleep patterns. Where does that data go? Now, this goes into biocapitalism. Because, for example, Fitbit is a very popular brand, marker, very popular. Well, who owns Fitbit? Google owns Fitbit. In January 2021, Google paid $2.1 billion to buy Fitbit. So the data from your Fitbit tracker goes to Google. Okay, all these tech companies, Google and Apple and Amazon, they're investing heavily in health insurance companies because they will get the data from the health insurance companies. Now, during the pandemic, the National Health Service in England, for example, the government passed a new law by saying all patient private records in the health service can be shared with technology companies because now we need to work together. Okay. Now, major hospitals around the world, not only in Europe but in America, the hospitals have had arrangements with tech companies to share their data, because the tech companies are now creating new AI models for health areas. So that's biocapitalism. Now, biopolitics is where the power over your body doesn't just go to the state, it goes to certain institutions that are given permission by the state. And these can be non-governmental organizations, and for example, the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is a private institution. It's not a government or institution. And we know by the new WHO pandemic treaty, they want to have the authority to be in control over the governments, over the people. So that's biopolitics. And just to finish here, biosecurity means that the political institutions are putting in new laws to securitize your body and your movement through digital identification, through passports, and maybe through, you know, technological interventions. So biopower is not only now in institutions, it's pervasive, it's everywhere through biocapitalism, biopolitics, biosecurity. That's a brief summary. So as you can see, it's a huge subject.
Claro, el tema es que nosotros mismos estamos contribuyendo a eso, porque la gente que lleva pues, las pulseras, también está la de Apple, bueno, los relojes, hay de muchísimas marcas ya, y los niños ya las tienen. Todos esos datos, o sea, la gente está acostumbrada a dar sus datos biométricos y a no cuestionarlo. Incluso en el banco ahora mismo te lo piden. Entonces, ahora mismo no es obligatorio, pero tú lo dices en algún momento del libro, que al final tú das los datos, crees que es opcional, ¿no? Crees que es algo voluntario, pero al final, y hay un momento en el que ya lo hacen obligatorio y ya no tienes vuelta atrás. Es lo que nos está pasando.
Yeah, I think that's their agenda, their plan. If you can see where they want to go, the end point, you can see the stages they're trying to move down to get there. So that, you know, they're being very clever because they're utilizing stages where we willingly give our data. So, for example, if tomorrow the government said we're making a new law, everybody has to give their data, there would be chaos. People would resist this. So they're going through more subtle ways through sport. Now, many people are happy to wear sport bands, you know, because they want to know about their body. But a lot of these sport brands, if it's not Fitbit, it's a Chinese company, or for example, they make more money selling your data than selling a 20 euro bracelet. You know, they make money on data, and this is surveillance capitalism. And now, for example, when digital identification first started coming out, it came out in music concerts. They said people have to show a test proof that you are fit, you know, you're healthy, not contagious, and you have to prove who you are. So you had to take your ID to get into a music concert. Now everybody wants to go to a music concert, so they say, oh, it's a willing sacrifice, you know. Now I've just heard that in America, the football league is introducing biometrics to get into the football stadium. So you have to give your biometrics just to get in. Now, sport is so popular amongst the masses that people are going to say, I need to see my football game. So, oh, it's nothing big, it's not national. You know, I'm willing to sacrifice some bio data to go and see my football game. But you see, that's where it starts, because once you give away a little bit, once you start to be willing to give a little data, it becomes easier to give a lot of data. You know? So it's a function creep, what we call it. It's creeping slowly, and eventually there will be some event whereby the government will say, well, you're giving your data for health, you're giving your data for money, for getting your money out the bank, you're giving your data for payments, for sport. Why not just give your total national data, you know? So yes.
Sí, y puede que haya un momento en el que suceda o hagan suceder algo para que los pocos que quedamos sin dar los datos voluntariamente los tengamos que dar de una forma no voluntaria. Y ahí puede que suceda algo en el que puede que haya un evento en el que tengamos que tomar una decisión, porque para estar dentro de este sistema en el que vivimos vamos a tener que pasar por dar nuestros datos. ¿Tú ves real que eso suceda? ¿Crees que vamos a llegar ahí? Y si es así, bueno, yo ya sé que tú has vivido en plan autosuficiente en el campo, pero ¿cómo estás tú con ese tema? ¿Crees que vamos a llegar a eso y hay solución?
Well, I'm always optimistic and positive, and I see that the more time that this process gets delayed, or the more time we have, it's going to be more difficult to implement it, because the amount of people that are aware of this compared to 2 or 3 years ago is incredible. You see, now you see, there's different levels of awareness. You don't have to know all what's going on about biosecurity and the bigger picture to know that something's wrong here, you know. And I think a lot of people are in this middle category whereby they smell something's wrong, you know. And since the last few years and the pandemic, they've realized that, you know, it doesn't feel right. There's something going on. We're not being told the truth. So we may not understand exactly the full details, but I think there's enough people to start, you know, resisting and pushing back, because I think they need enough people to join this to put pressure on those who don't. So it would be you know, they want to give access to those who agree to it and stop access, stop maybe travel and certain health or financial access to other people. But if a lot of people say, I don't want this, then I think they're going to have to try something different. So people are waking up. I don't think they're going to succeed. I have an intuition that something's coming in that's really pushing back against this inhuman evolutionary pathway.
Qué bueno. Aquí podemos volver al tema de tu nuevo libro, ¿no? De inversión. Volvemos a Steiner, porque hablas de las fuerzas animánicas, que son las que te echan para abajo, hablas de la entropía y cómo al final hay una lucha entre el bien y el mal. ¿Tú crees que hay un punto en el que cuando llega el mal tan abajo hace como un muelle y vuelve para arriba?
I do, because talking about Steiner and the Ahrimanic forces, Steiner, for those not familiar with the work of Rudolf Steiner, he said, in this great technological age, there's going to be these forces that are going to be very dominant. And these are the forces of mechanization and the forces of control, the forces of order, the forces of anti-spirit that want to contain the human being, contain the human spirit. And these forces are going to be more operative in a time of high technology and materialism, because it's their natural environment. So, and if we look at the world today, we notice that in the last 10, 20 years, the global environment has become increasingly mechanized. Not only, in everything, infrastructure and all our technological communications, our security, everything. And so that allows these forces to operate more. I call them entropic forces, which means that they're, instead of going further through developmental evolution, they're pushing back against human development. Now, my understanding is that some of these forces people call evil. And, of course, evil is a very big word, but for me, evil means anything which takes you away or tries to separate you from the human spirit. Okay, but of course, why are these forces exist in the world, in the universe? Why do they exist? Because if we didn't have opposition, it would be very hard to have movement. So, for example, if you lived, let's just imagine, if you lived in paradise and everything was perfect, how would you develop? You'd have no stimulus to develop. You have no need to develop because you have everything, And so friction, the polarizing force, the opposing force, is something which helps development. For example, if you drive a car, now, if the wheel of the car didn't have friction with the road, you wouldn't have momentum. Now, you try driving a car on ice. It doesn't move because it has no friction. So my understanding is that in our material world, these forces actually are working in opposition to give people a choice for development. Because if we don't see the negative, evil, anti-human aspects, we may not have the stimuli to push forward in the human trajectory. Okay. So I think on one hand, the things that are happening in the world are very negative. They're very sad and and very distasteful. But on the other hand, if we can recognize them as stimuli, impulse to activate us into developing ourselves, into moving in the direction we want, we can utilize those forces. So I feel that there's going to be a point where there's going to be like a mass activation of people, and they're going to realize, we're not going in the right direction. We have to quickly change to go in the right direction. So that's why I feel ultimately that the human path, the human endeavor will succeed. But maybe we have to go through more chaos for more people to be activated. Because the more asleep we are, the louder the alarm bell has to be. So will it be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Eventually, I think we're going to get to the activation, but I'm not sure when. Maybe something big will have to happen first.
Claro, quizás tenga que pasar otra vez algo muy grande. Eso que dices es totalmente cierto, ¿no? De hecho, fíjate la ola de despertares, por llamarlos de alguna manera, que está habiendo desde 2020, ¿no? Que ha sido un acelerador increíble. Me encanta el ejemplo que das del coche. Hay un tema que me parece interesante, siguiendo con el hilo de Rudolf Steiner, que es la electricidad. Me ha parecido increíble. Te basas en un ensayo de Steiner en el que habla de la electricidad como una fuerza también entrópica. Me gustaría que lo compartieras aquí, porque ahora mismo estamos en una sociedad que ya no hay vuelta atrás. Nosotros estamos teniendo esta entrevista así, porque, es como que hemos llegado a un punto ya de no retorno, y me parece que la explicación sobre la electricidad es bastante impactante e interesante para quedarse pensando sobre ella. Cuéntanos. Sí.
Okay, it's a difficult subject if you're not familiar with Steiner. I'll try to simplify it. Now, Steiner said that there's natural light, such as sunlight. Now, sunlight is the creator of all life. Without sunlight, there would not be life on this planet. It gives us energy, it gives us everything. But of course, now humankind have discovered how to create electricity. And Rudolf Steiner says that electricity, it gives us a lamp, it gives us light, but it's not natural light, it's a sublight. It's subnatural energy. And Rudolf Steiner said 100 years ago, if we become totally entrapped in a world of subnatural light, i.e. electricity, it's going to be detrimental or negative to human development because it has different energies. Now, for example, I think we all experience this. If we spend too many hours looking at the computer screen, we start to have our eyes hurt, we have a headache, or if you look at if the lamp over your head is for too long, you can have a headache. So there's electrical light has a different frequency. Now, natural light, the sun, of course, it can burn you, but it has a frequency which is positive overall. And because electricity is artificially created or created through, tools and interventions, it has a different frequency. And too much exposure to it can decrease the human frequency also. Now, of course, electricity can be beneficial. We use it in everything. We use it for our travel. We use it for work. We use it for all our homes and everything. But that's okay to some degree. But if we start to immerse ourselves in it too much, it's going to lower the human frequency. And when you lower the human frequency, again, you start to disconnect the human spirit from the higher frequency reception. So, for example, spending too much time on the internet or computer games. Also, I talk about the metaverse, the idea of this virtual world, which will become our whole world. Now, people think, or the way that they are selling it to us is the metaverse is this new virtual future. It's not material, it's digital. But I'm saying that's a false materialism, because what runs the metaverse? Well, you need a computer server which runs on electricity. You need all these computerized aspects to create the metaverse. So in fact, it's a deeper level of materiality. In fact, it's so deep, it's immaterial. You can't touch it, but it is constructed through materiality. So it's a false kingdom. It's a false trap. And if you spend all the time in your computer with your avatar in the metaverse, you are actually spending more time in an environment of lower frequency. And that will disconnect you from the world. Disconnect you. I mean, a lot of people who spend time in these worlds start to have lesser social relationships with friends. When they communicate with lesser language, with abbreviations. People are losing their language, losing their communication skills. So I think Steiner was quite correct to point out that the world of electricity is a subnatural world. It can be useful as a tool to give us things, but if we enter into the world of the subnatural light, we are going to lower our human frequency.
Ya, y lo estamos haciendo. O sea, es que este no es un tema de salud. Se habla mucho de la salud, con la luz, pero no es un tema de salud, es un tema de energía y es un tema de espíritu, ¿no? Que te baja el espíritu. Hablando de esto, hay otro tema también que es la mente humana, ¿no? Que es, siempre decimos, en la quinta columna, que les conoces también, hablan de van a por nuestra mente, ¿no? Están intentando, ya sabemos, neuromodular nuestros pensamientos con el grafeno, más las ondas electromagnéticas, bueno, todo este plan que tú ya conoces. Y tú hablas en el libro de que la totalidad del sistema humano, del sistema nervioso humano, está sufriendo una transformación. Y hablas de los neurointerventores. ¿Cómo funciona esto? ¿Cómo crees que lo están haciendo? ¿Cuál es tu hipótesis o lo que has comprobado?
Well, there's two aspects there. One is getting into our minds, and the other is into our nervous system. Because the nervous system is the kind of the transmitter of the energy for the body. And of course, the way we think is very important, and that affects our bodily health. Now, the human mind, to get into the human mind has always been the holy grail, the Graal Sagrado, no? Because if you can control how a person thinks, you have a huge amount of control over a person. Now, before, the control was external through propaganda. They tell you something and they hope that you believe it. They try and condition you. Now, the technology to get into your mind is a much more sophisticated. Not only do they use subliminals in the films, and they use images and symbolism in the films to get into your mind, but of course we are awash in a huge electromagnetic environment. Okay, and our bodies is not accustomed to this huge increase in electromagnetic radiation. Now, we know, for example, that the American and the Russian militaries for a long time have been working on the technology to be able to transfer thoughts through these wavelengths to try to influence people. Now, that's another subject, and that gets quite deep. So, but there are ways to try to influence people's minds by the way we move through this electromagnetic environment. But of course, the electromagnetic environment also affects the human body and the nervous system, because the nervous system is attuned to the frequency of the planet. Because human beings and all beings on this planet, when you are born, now it's so interesting that the human being is the only biological creature which is born with a decreased or uncompleted nervous system to our degree. So when an animal is born, usually within one day, they're up and running around and they know how to survive. They have the instinct. But the human being, when the baby is born, it needs months or years to grow an instinct of survival, which is why you need a lot of time with the parents.
Sí.
Because the human body hasn't completed the nervous system when it's born. So what the human body does, the baby, the nervous system, it kind of like, it picks up energy from the environment, and therefore it uses that to synchronize. That's why the human body with our hertz frequency is synchronized with the frequency of the planet, because it's our natural environment. But of course, if you change that environment, if you change the electromagnetic spectrum of our environment, then especially now, the young generation babies being born, the nervous system will feel that this electrified environment is normal and start to kind of rewire according to that. Now, before, our electrified environment was just like ground level. We had cables and Wi-Fi and antennae, but now that's changed, because now, if you look up, we have the satellites. And so all this at different levels is creating a kind of, you could say, a electromagnetic cage of the planet. And so that's going to change the frequencies that the human beings are moving through. And that could obviously affect the human nervous system to make us, and that's why it's an argument for transhumanism, because With transhumanism, they say if you can connect with technology, you are more in synchronization with your environment. But what came first? First, they changed the environment, and now they're saying we have to synchronize with it. So it's this step-by-step agenda to deform the human being and to deconstruct our energetic signature. That's important. The human being has an energetic signature. And the original energetic signature is one that connects, receives vital energies, source energies, sacred energies, energies beyond the earth. But of course, if you change that vibratory signature, we're going to be more receptive to what's around the earth and less receptive to what may be coming in. If that makes sense.
Es que sí, es que este tema es increíble porque tampoco sabemos cuál era el ser humano original. No sabemos si lo que tenemos ahora es la versión 0.0 o es la versión 0.8, ¿no? De la misma forma que el embarazo ahora dura 9 meses, y con esto que has dicho de que el ser humano nace y le dejas en una selva y se muere, no es como un bebé elefante que sobrevive. Hay una explicación de antropólogos que es que el embarazo duraba 18 meses y al reducirse al caminar los seres humanos, ¿no? Al ponernos en 2 piernas, no 4 patas, se redujo el ancho de cadera y se redujo también la gestación. Y hay otros 9 meses de exterogestación, le llaman 9 dentro y 9 fuera. Quizás de la misma forma que evolucionamos así, otra explicación es que esta sea nuestra evolución y que ya lo que dice sea lo normal. Porque lo que tenemos ahora tampoco es lo original. De alguna forma puede pasar algo que nos devuelva el diseño original, o estamos abocados al transhumanismo. No hay vuelta atrás. Yo cada vez lo veo más así, ¿no? Como que todo te va llevando. ¿Cuál crees que es la salida?
Well, I mean, it's true you say that, the human being on 2 legs has a narrower birth canal, which means the baby has to be born sooner. And so it has to, and that's why the nurturing environment is so important, okay? And that's why in the last few decades, or the last 50 years especially, there's been a social movement away from breaking down the human family, okay? So there, before the human, I think the family unit was a much stronger unit. And so the baby had a nurturing environment, and it's very important that you spend time with the parents in the early days. Now because of economic conditions, and often both parents are working, a lot of babies at very young age go to daycare, and then at a very young age, have you noticed that there are certain narratives entering the education system at a very young age, so about identity, social identities, sexual identities, technology is entering. I've seen babies like 1-year-old in a pram with a tablet, because now, parents think, let's keep them quiet, give them a tablet. So you see, the environment has changed. And before, when you're at school, you had certain themes, let's say social sexual identities. You didn't get those themes until you were 15, 16. I mean, at my age, and now you're getting them at 5 years old or something. So the environment is affecting what you may call our natural growth. So I think the human biological birth is natural to our evolutionary species. But what has been unnaturalized is our social cultural environment, and we have to be mindful of that. But of course, the human being again is very adaptive, very resistant. So even though we're going through a time of pressure, a time of mutational pressure, some people may be mutating into the technological addicts and etc. But of course, you can still adapt very quickly. If the environment changes, the human body will rewire itself very quickly. And it recognizes that, I feel, the human being recognizes the home resonance, what I call the natural resonance, because it's the original resonance. So, for example, if you go out of tune, like tuning a radio station, if you go to the wrong station, you can all, if you recognize I'm listening to the wrong music station, you can always retune it and come back. The human being can retune it because it recognizes the original station, the original transmission. So all is not lost.
Qué bueno, me gusta eso. Sí, tenemos un poder, hablamos otra vez, ¿no? Del espíritu, el alma, que al final tiene como, sabe reconocer eso. Quizás por eso también existan estos libros que tú escribes, estemos hablando ahora de esto, haya esta corriente de despertar, ¿no? Y que al final no seamos tan fáciles de que haya una mayoría, pero que esta minoría vaya creciendo y haga un clic al resto y no nos dejemos transhumanizar. Porque el cerebro, volviendo al cerebro, ¿tú crees que ya nos están implantando pensamientos? Se ha hablado ya de esto, ¿no? De implantar pensamientos y emociones, y esto ya está muy experimentado en tecnología militar. ¿Crees que ya nos lo están haciendo a nivel normal, nivel ciudadano normal?
Yes, I mean, when I was at university in sociology, I was studying surveillance technologies as well as part of my sociology. And I looked into certain military technologies. In fact, one paper I published online in 2008 was talking about how the military are patenting technologies to affect the human mind. Now, as I said, this is a holy grail. They want to be able to implant ideas. Now, they don't talk about this, but they've been researching it for decades and more. And yes, I mean, I would say they have the technology, and there's been case studies where many people have been affected by thought implantation. And because, you just have to really be able to, because everything is frequency. And if you can match a frequency with the brain frequency, then you can implant a frequency which gives you thoughts. And so it's a military project which has been going on for decades, and Russia and America are at the forefront of that, because they're very interested in these psychological mechanisms, these psychic programs. So yeah, it's possible, but again, that's why it's very important to have a stable sense of self, what I call a grounding, a coherency, because a lot of what's happening in the world of information is of a lower frequency. The entertainment we get, the modern movies, these modern musicians who are puppets for the music industry. They don't write their songs, they get given this, and as we know, the propaganda, all this is lower, denser frequencies. And if you're operating on that lower frequency, then of course your mind can be numbed. We don't think about the human spirit. We're too busy being distracted. We're too busy being entertained. And if you lose that kind of critical faculty, the awareness, then it's much easier for things to come into your mind that you're not aware of. It's very simple, like we do on films. You watch a film, and then maybe the next day you are singing a song, humming a song from the film. You didn't realize it, but they put that frequency in your mind. Or maybe a week later, for some reason, you wake up in the morning and you remember something from that film or something from the song. So we don't think about these things, but it shows you it's very easy to put ideas into our minds. And that's why the more we are in the frequency of fear, the frequency of uncertainty, the frequency of lack of self-trust, that means we have lesser, let's say, coherency, and we're more vulnerable or more open to receive impacts and influences from outside. But if we come back to being, that's why I think for me, the major point is awareness. If we are aware of this environment around us, we keep awareness about what we think. Is that my thought, or did something put that there? Then we can actually raise a frequency whereby we're not susceptible or we're not vulnerable to these implants. Now, opinions is one thing. Everybody has an opinion, but where do opinions come from? in the last few years, you could speak to 20 people and they could all say something very similar. And you think, where did they get that from? And then you look at the TV and you realize the TV is saying the same thing. So we like to think our opinions are our own, but actually most opinions are not our own. So we have to make this separation between what we take in, because information is a type of food. Okay. Now, you would not want to spend your life eating terrible genetic modified fast food, would you? But information is the same. If you take in the wrong information, it's going to affect your body. So we have to be careful about what we eat and what information we receive. And critical awareness, I think, is key.
Claro, esto es muy bueno porque nos devuelve el poder, ¿no? Que hagan lo que hagan, si tú estás en un estado de conciencia, más o menos como dices, puedes percibir lo que viene de ti y lo que viene de fuera. Es complicado, ¿no? Para eso tienes que desconectar de todo esto para conectar con la naturaleza, ¿no? Que dices el grounding, es andar descalzo, estar conectado contigo mismo, tener un tiempo para ti mismo, para meditar, pensar, investigar. ¿Tú en qué estás ahora? ¿Qué estás investigando ahora mismo?
Well, I mean, different things. I mean, at the moment, I'm again investigating the two sides of this threshold. The side which is trying to take us through nihilism. Well, I call it non-being. Because nihilism, I call it the technologies of non-being, whereby they want to make us more automated. They want us to lose remembrance of the human spirit. Because if we don't remember it, it can be all around us like air. How many times a day do we think that we're breathing air? We don't. We just breathe it naturally. We don't think, thank God there's air. You know, I mean, yes, thank God there is air, but we don't think that. We take it naturally. Well, of course, also everything else, it's all around us that we just don't think about it so much. And they can take our focus away from the humanity part of the human being and make us non-being. So I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at the other side of the threshold, which I feel is going to be eventually a kind of a renaissance in the human spirit, because humanity is going to be pushed to an extreme place, and that extreme place could be quite dark, whereby we feel we have no hope, we have only tyranny or authoritarian tyranny and technology for the future. But at that point, when you're pushed into a corner, that's when the human spirit can really start to push back. So I do feel that threshold is coming. And I said it doesn't, and I feel that the advantage is with humanity, because we have great power. But you see, we've given our power away to a very small group. And the only reason this group has power is because humanity hasn't taken its power back. You know, once we start to take our power back, and if we collectively just said, no thanks, not interested, you know, what can they do? Can they arrest everybody and put everybody into prison? So, you know, I feel we don't need a revolution in violence. We need a revolution in waking up. And that's going to come eventually, but the question is how dark or how far do we have to go? But of course, like I said before, this could be an evolutionary mechanism, because humanity needs now, we've gone so far into materialism, into selfish individualism, into relative truths. So there's no truth, there's no sacredness, there's no, you know, it's only me. We've come to that end. And so now I feel that we're going through a kind of mechanism to push us away from that, back into recognition of our humanity. Now, it doesn't have to be religious. You don't have to believe in spirit, but everybody recognizes an element of the human spirit, the human soul, something which is life and not anti-life. And the world we see around us is increasingly anti-life. All the war, the killing, the crazy political movements, it's a theater of anti-life. I call it the theater of the absurd. There's nothing common sense about it. And I think that people are going to realize that we need to get back to common sense, human values, eventually.
Claro, qué bueno. Es que si realmente no tuviéramos tanto poder, no harían tanto esfuerzo ni pondrían tanto en intentar quitárnoslo, en todas estas maniobras de distracción, ¿no? Porque es mucho trabajo, la industria cinematográfica, del entretenimiento, de la comunicación, todo eso es para desconectarnos de esta esencia de la que hablas, ¿no? Pero hay que ser muy fuerte para salirse de ahí.
They use a process of compartmentalization. So, for example, right now we have the aspect of war. So we have the war between Russia and the West that's been created. I mean, there's a lot of suffering going on, but at a higher level, this is being manipulated by globalist forces. And then, of course, you have the Israel and Palestinian situation, which has always been a hotspot that can be activated. Sí. You have China and Taiwan, and you have, you know, India and Pakistan. You have all these hotspots. And so if you're focused on war, all the time you're reading the news about war, you're reading the politics of war. And then you have normal politics, you know, whether who has the real power, left or right, PSO, you know, Democrats, Republicans, Labour, Conservative. You know, you're focused on politics, or you might be focused on finance, and you're worried about the coming central bank digital currency. So you're looking over there, okay? And so there's all these distractions of decompartmentalization, and that's why we need to join the dots and realize that they're all part of the huge kind of plan to distract us from ourselves, you know, because we're looking out at that. So yes, it is a plan of distraction, and that's why, you know, there's been a huge push towards entertainment, big mega superhero movies and all this, because people want a distraction, but it's a false alternative. So I think the globalist plan basically is to distract us from ourselves, to entertain us to death, more or less.
Es muy bueno eso.
Remember that story about the lion enclosure?
Ajá, cuéntanosla, sí.
Well, I like this story. I call it the lion's enclosure. And it's about one day this small lion was captured and taken to an enclosure that was full of all other lions. And this new lion had never seen so many lions before. And he got pushed into this enclosure. And then he's looking around and saw that the lions had been there for so long, for generations. Some lions have died and other lions have come in generations and generations. So he observed them, what they were doing. And the lions organized themselves in certain groups. Some lions were religious groups. Some lions were cultural groups, and they had cultural events. Some lions were sporting groups and had sporting events. Sometimes the lions would fight amongst themselves because they disagreed with their groups. Some lions were revolutionary lions, and they tried to kill the camp guards. But when they killed them, they just replaced them with more guards. And so this activity went on and on. And the new lion saw that there was one particular lion who took no interest in all these groups, just sitting there on his own. Maybe he was asleep. And all these other lions were just ignoring him, saying, oh, don't worry about him, he's crazy, he's a conspiracy lion, forget him. So the new lion eventually goes over to this sleeping lion, and then he realizes he's not asleep. And he says, if you're not asleep, why don't you go and involve yourself with all these other groups? And the lion said, no, I don't get involved with those groups. And the new lion said, well, why not? And the big lion said, because they do everything, but they miss the essential. And the new lion said, but what is the essential? And the other one said, the essential is to observe the nature of the fence.
Qué bueno.
So if we don't realize the nature of what's enclosing us, we'll just keep on going with our distractions.
Sí, tenemos que sentarnos tranquilamente a observar dónde estamos, ¿no? Para poder salir, primero tenemos que saber que estamos encerrados y ver la valla. Sí, me ha encantado lo del león conspiranoico. Sí.
We don't have to do big things. I mean, you don't have to go out and like try to be in nature. I recommend it.
Sí.
Go walks in nature, but it doesn't mean you have to go and try and buy a house in nature, because many people can't do that. But we can just take a moment to step back in everyday's life. Step back, take some time to, like you say, be with yourself. Recognize the sense of yourself. Recognize your own thoughts, because everyone's thoughts, everyone's true essence has like a taste you recognize. So learn to recognize your own taste. Learn to have a moment out. Take some time just to sit and relax. Don't always rush around so much, because I think the world is trying to pull us out, and we need to kind of pull ourselves back in a bit, because we're being distracted from ourselves. Yeah.
Qué bueno. Es que es muy gracioso esto de la naturaleza, ¿no? Se habla de la naturaleza como si nosotros no fuéramos la naturaleza. Nosotros somos también la naturaleza. Entonces, esto que dices es esencial. Mirar dentro, ya estás en conexión con la naturaleza.
Yeah, and that's another great narrative, the environment. There's, this climate narrative is very delicate. It's dividing many people, because the global narrative is that the human beings are responsible for the global degradation. So, if the global narrative, if someone says to you, do you want to look after the earth? Do you want to treat it well? Everyone's going to say, of course, I want to look after the earth. It's my home environment. So it's very difficult when you start to critically analyze this narrative. But you see, what they're trying to do again is separate humans from the natural environment. Humans are bad for the environment. We shouldn't go out. We shouldn't travel. Of course, they're supplying all the fuel and the energy, but also carbon is a big issue. Carbon is a gas of life. Carbon is used in greenhouses for plants to grow. Of course, and it's been, again, this is the post-truth narratives. We've been told so many different narratives, we're not sure what's correct. So we have to kind of just, come back, take it easy, and look very clearly at some of these narratives before we jump and start to argue about them. Look very closely at them, because one of the strategies the globalists use is to hijack language. So they invert language, they twist it around. So when something used to be the gas of life, now it's the gas of death. And when something used to be good for us, now it's bad for us. So now we're told that we shouldn't keep our own chickens because it's bad for the environment. We shouldn't grow our own food because it's bad for the environment. And cows give off methane, which is bad for the environment. So they're turning natural language into a narrative. We should be very careful.
Sí, es que es un reto, ¿no? Mantenerse en el centro, en el propio centro, con todas, aparte de las distracciones, las manipulaciones, como dices, incluso del lenguaje, a todo le han dado la vuelta. En 2020 se ha visto, ¿no? Alguien que cuestiona la verdad es un negacionista, alguien que investiga es un conspiranoico, a todo le han dado la vuelta y es muy difícil mantenerse en el centro. Y es muy difícil, y por eso me gusta tanto la historia del león que cuentas, es muy difícil no caer, no salirte de un grupo y entrar en otro, porque al final somos seres gregarios y necesitamos pertenecer a un grupo. Y cuando entras en un grupo ya tienes la trampa, ya no ves la the big picture, ¿no? Como hablamos al principio. Entonces, es complicado. Para unir los puntos, que es el título que hemos puesto a esta entrevista, uno se tiene que alejar, y es con lo que empezaste, tiene que alejar para ver los puntos, para poder unirlos. Si está dentro de uno, no los puede ver. Y eso también caemos mucho los de nuestro lado, se supone, de despiertos, conspiranoicos, enterados. Caemos mucho también en quedarnos ahí, ¿no? En trincheras, pequeñas trincheras, ¿no?
Exactly. You say we have to come back to the essential, because the strategy is to compartmentalize people.
Claro.
to divide us between ourselves. So now we are attacking each other because you don't believe what I believe. We have different politics. We have different social identities. We have different sexual identities. We believe different opinions about the environment. So we're fighting each other.
Claro.
If we're fighting each other, we're losing contact with what is the essential. The essential is we're all human beings. You know, really, we all want the same thing. We want a better world for our human future. We want our human freedom to develop and grow in the way we choose. You know, I think the golden rule is very correct. You know, don't do unto others what you do not wish them to do unto you.
Mm-hmm.
As long as we don't trespass onto other people's freedom, we all want the same thing. But we're missing the essential because we're fighting against each other. And that's a deliberate strategy. And Rudolf Steiner talked about that 100 years ago. He said, you know, you'll have increased nationalisms, you'll have increased divisions between people, because that lowers our energy and allows negative forces to manipulate us. You know? And we are being manipulated. If we're fighting, we're being manipulated.
Sí, sí, y caemos todos en la trampa. Bueno, creo que hemos unido bastantes puntos hoy, Kingsley, que ha sido muy interesante la charla. Me gustaría que siguiéramos hablando en otra ocasión. Voy a terminarme este libro y hablamos más en profundidad de inversión, que me parece que es la clave ahora mismo en estos momentos. Voy a poner tu web donde tienes no solamente los libros, tu vida, tienes también colaboraciones musicales, que voy a poner una al final de este vídeo. Como lo vamos a editar, voy a poner uno de ellos que Kingsley para esparcir, estoy diciéndolo como traducido en inglés, para diseminar su mensaje, también utiliza la música y está unido con un músico y bueno, ya lo veréis, lo voy a poner ahora mismo.
Fell asleep. You didn't know how to awaken, living your days in fruitless wishing for better days. Days go by. The patterns of your life never seem to fade. You wish you knew me then. You never could truly know another. Rocking by the years inside another's dream. You thought it was yours back in the days when everything seemed so simple and no one was waking up. Sleepy eyes gazing out, lazy eyes looking out. Knowing why things are this way is no longer so easy. Not so easy to know between the filaments of your sleep. I can't help you if you don't wake up. I can't help you if you don't wake up.
¿Qué más? ¿Qué más? Hay también artículos en tu web y están todos los libros. Bueno, no sé, ha sido un placer hablar contigo. Me parece que has dicho cosas que son claves para pensar. Vuelvo a recomendar este libro, Asalto a la realidad, biopoder y la normalización del engaño. Y este lo recomiendo, aunque no me lo he acabado, La inversión, cómo hemos sido engañados, manipulados para percibir una falsa realidad. Bueno, ha sido un placer y muchísimas gracias. Seguimos hablando.
Well, Lara, un placer para mí también. Muchas gracias. And yes, if anyone's interested in reading articles in Spanish, on my website, there's a menu saying Español, and I have all my articles in Spanish, I think over 60 of them over many years, thanks to my translator friends, all free to read and download and take away. Do your own research, find your own path. Don't trust us to give you the truth for you. Trust yourselves.
Sí, qué buen consejo. Es que si fuéramos capaces de aplicar eso, ya sería todo, ¿no? Con eso ya está, ya estaría. Volver a nuestra esencia y confiar en nosotros mismos, en nuestro criterio, que sabemos más de lo que pensamos. Bueno, thank you very much. See you. Y bueno, gracias a todos y nos vemos. Hasta luego.